Networks aren't built with orders. They're woven in silence. The 3 signal points were born from that silence, not from command, not from strategy maps, but from quiet walks through old neighborhoods, watching how the air moved around corners, how sound bent against walls. The first location was at the bend between 2 narrow streets, where the lamp cast light at just the right slant. At night, sound there didn't echo, it rolled, like water searching for a path. Above the doorway, the housewife kept a small mirror hung by twine to check on the cat, she said. But when turned slightly outward, it caught the glint of a lantern's flicker. You'd never see it unless you were looking for it. If you did, you knew it meant safe to move. The second point was the courtyard near the old mill. A crooked clock always ran behind, no one remembered to fix it. The watchdog didn't bark at people, only at the squeal of metal. So we choreographed a simple moment, 2 taps of the grain scoop on a feeding pan, and the dog would jump, growl, spin in place. The sentry at the back always turned at the sound. We didn't need long, just enough to pass behind the shed. The third point was the grain storage building. There was a back entrance, wooden doors with an inner latch, and a half-buried brick at the threshold. If you nudged the brick outward just slightly, the door would never shut fully. A crack of warm light would slip through, not enough to draw suspicion, but enough to tell someone watching from the alley. The contact passed. Move. Before confirming the sights, I walked each one several times as the woman I had become for this stretch of work. A woman with work in her hands. Sometimes it was a bundle of eggs. Sometimes seeds. Sometimes milk or carrots or folded linen. When you carry something fragile, people allow you to move slowly. And slowness, in my work, is the finest disguise. I spoke to the woman with the mirror. She was sharp-eyed, kind, and always a little tired. She knew better than to ask questions, and better still how to listen without appearing to. She once told me she lost her son in the First War. I was younger than you are now, she said, but old enough to never forget. I asked her, without asking, if I could trust her. She answered, without answering, by offering me warm bread without charge and never looking at what I carried in my left hand. Setting up the operation wasn't about detonators or clocks. It was about rhythm. We weren't stopping trains. We were slowing rhythms. A shipment delayed by minutes at point 1 creates tension in a schedule at point 2, and confusion by point 3. And with that, opportunity for us. Or a nightmare for them. But all of it depended on a perfect pattern. And people who knew how to follow it without being told twice. The woman at the second point, by the mill, was named Elise. She ran a side business boiling herbs and drying socks. I brought her fresh garlic once, pretending it was for her tea. She gave me the nod the second time we met. That was all we needed. The third point's contact was a baker's nephew, 16, with shoes too big and a need to prove he mattered. He was the risk. But he was also fast, clever, and invisible to most grown-ups. I trained him myself. I showed him how to breathe quieter, how to stand still while people moved, how to scratch his neck when he meant yes and tug his sleeve for no. And most importantly, I told him, do not ever repeat what you do. Not to your friends. Not even to the mirror. He grinned. Who would believe me? That worried me. My cover this time was simple. A woman helping a farmer's wife. I picked potatoes. Sorted corn. Used the limp to stay on the outer edge of the market, always slightly behind, slightly tired, slightly ignored. I sent reports through Horace every other night. 3 points confirmed, I tapped. Pattern tested with safe timings. Local response, minimal. They answered. Operation to begin in 5 days. Maintain silence. Watch for movement. So I watched. And noticed something small. Not a wrong action, but a wrong rhythm. At the mill, Elise had always moved like water, smooth, quiet, unhurried. But now she was too quiet. Her hands too still. She didn't look at me when we passed. She didn't hand me the usual cloth-wrapped packet. Just nodded once. No eye contact. I said nothing, but my breath tightened. Something had changed. And not just her. Later that evening, I sat behind the grain shop, tuning the signal. I hadn't planned to send a message, only to listen. But the air was noisier than usual. Too many voices. There were rumors in the city about a woman who limps, seen near a bakery, near the pharmacy, near the train yard. Too many nears. I wrote nothing, only listened. And the moment I heard the words "foreign radio patterns detected," I turned off Horace mid-code and held my breath. Someone was watching the waves. And someone, maybe, was talking too much. I didn't sleep that night. Not from fear. From calculation. Because tomorrow was rehearsal. And if the pattern broke now, we wouldn't get another chance. Rehearsal nights are supposed to be boring. You walk the route without touching anything. You breathe the timing without leaving a mark. You let the city teach you its pulse, and you promise not to impose your own. I started at the bend with the little mirror. The housewife set it exactly where we'd agreed, but her hand trembled at the final twist of twine. She smiled too brightly, the way people do when a dog is growling behind their teeth. "Bread?" she asked, as always. "Tomorrow," I said, as always. We never exchanged more than 3 words. Habit is armor. I limped on, counting lamplight like beads, turning my head at the same places I always turned it, making sure the city could rely on me being exactly as uninteresting as I had been yesterday. At the mill courtyard, Elise was there. Shoulders squared. Sleeves rolled. But something in her stance kept time with a different orchestra. She did not look my way. She scraped the scoop twice against the pan, our rehearsal tap, then paused. The dog didn't bark. He only rose, ears high, then sat again as if someone had trained him to doubt us. That was wrong. I moved past without breaking stride, but my breath changed. I felt it in the throat, thin, dry air across a small place that prefers moisture and calm. At the grain store, the brick under the threshold was where it should be. The door held its practice mistake, a sliver of warm light like a patient waiting with a good book. The baker's nephew was supposed to pass at that moment, head down, hands deep in pockets, counting steps to show he was hearing me without looking. He didn't arrive. I waited the length of 6 heartbeats, plenty long for a rehearsal. Then I left. I didn't go to the cupboard behind the grain shop. I went to the alley 2 doors down, where I could listen without being seen. Foreign transmissions, a voice murmured nearby, 2 men moving slowly the way men move when they hope not to draw attention while doing exactly that. Night patterns, bakery quarter, same window, same noise. I shifted my stance, changed the limp, more pronounced, more weary. If they saw me, they'd see what they expected. A woman who had learned to put the sore foot down like a question mark. They didn't look. They were listening to the air. Good. Because I was too. The ether was crowded. Not loud, crowded. When too many cautious people try to be quiet in the same place, it becomes a chorus. I touched the flower box where Horace lay hidden and did not open it. Not yet. The next morning I arrived at the Mirror House with a bundle of carrots. A child opened the door, one I had never seen. "Mother's not well," the girl said. "She says thank you." "Tell her no work today," I said. "No bread either." The little girl blinked as if I'd spoken nonsense and closed the door politely. I walked to the mill. The dog watched me from the shade, head tilted. Elise was stirring herbs by the back wall. "Late frost coming," I said, because we always started with weather. "Frost, yes," she said. "And visitors who don't know what to wear." Another wrong rhythm, her sentences pulled tight like thread about to snap. "Keep to daylight," I said softly. "And carry less." She nodded once, queasy with agreement. I found the nephew behind the bakery, throwing stones at a rusted tin. The tin made that lovely hollow note boys love, proof the world answers back. You didn't pass last night, I said. Uncle asked me to stay, he said. Then he grinned. I told a friend I help with real work. He didn't believe me. That word again, believe, the word that sets a room on fire faster than a match. I held his gaze until the grin softened into the face of a boy who knows he has disappointed someone he wanted to impress. You're not to be believed, I said. That is the job. He nodded, small and miserable. I'm sorry. Good. Keep the sorry. Wear it like a coat. I wanted to cut him from the web on the spot. But we didn't have a replacement. You do not train a new runner in 2 days. So I gave him one more chance with a rule. He would not pass the third point. He would only watch the alley for strangers who watched too hard. He would report by scratching his ear on the way by, nothing more. Do you trust me? He asked, because children need that gift to do brave things. I trust discipline, I said. Be that. I sent a short plain message at noon. No code beyond timing and scarcity. Rehearsal unstable. Mill and mirror holding. Third point compromised by youth. Monitoring watchers on air. Answer. Hold pattern. Proceed with caution. Replace third contact if possible. Possible was a luxury. Instead, I changed the geometry. 3 points would remain, but the order would shift. The mirror would cue the mill would cue the back of the grain store, not the door. A lantern signal we had never used would become the confirmation. And I would walk the empty street opposite the bakery like a woman who always chose the long way. If someone watched the old door, they would watch an old story. We would be elsewhere, writing the new line. Dusk came early, the kind of evening that likes to hide in its own pockets. I took the eggs. The basket. The limp that keeps you human. At the corner, the mirror flashed once and then pretended it had never met me. At the mill, the scoop kissed metal twice, clear, confident. The dog rose and gave us 3 turns of the tail, our private good omen. I turned down the bakery street and slowed the whole of me, breath, hip, step. The nephew was across the lane, leaning into shadow the way boys lean into dare. Opposite him, a man stood still with an empty hand. People with purpose always hold something: bread, newspaper, anything. Men with empty hands are either lost or looking. He was not lost. I gave my first decoy a pause to adjust the basket strip, head bowed. The man's gaze itched against my cheek. He wanted a reason to keep looking. I gave him none. Instead, I pivoted, one of those slow turns people make when they are thinking of nothing, and crossed to the side door of the adjacent grain office, the one we never used. I put the basket down as if to knock. The man shifted, ready to be important. And in that small movement, the nephew scratched his ear. Stranger is watching, moving. Good boy. I picked up the basket again and went the long way around the block, letting the street decide my speed. At the second bend, I saw the reflection in a shop window. The watcher followed. Not close, not stupid. He was patient, which is worse. I made myself older. A small woman becoming smaller under the evening. He took the bait and relaxed a degree. Then I did something rude. I cut across the alley without looking, almost colliding with a cart. The driver swore, I apologized, the watcher checked his step, and the nephew slipped behind him to the new rear angle we had taught him that morning. We became a triangle, the safest shape for danger. I reached the back of the grain store, not the door with the brick, but the dark panel where the wall meets the shed. The lamp we had never used hung there, boring as dust. I lifted it, exposed the wick a finger's width, and gave one breath, nothing a stranger would notice, then set it down. Across the lane, a second glint answered from the mirror house, barely there. At the mill, a third wink was hiding in the dog's collar ring. 3 points. New order. Old city. I wanted to feel triumph. Instead, I felt a vibration in the ground, the hum of a truck 2 streets away. Trucks don't hum at that hour without reason. I did not hurry. I did not slow. I became the woman who always had time to get home before the eggs remembered the world is unkind. At the end of the block, the watchers stopped following and looked back toward the square, head tilted, listening to the same vibration I felt. He chose the truck. I chose the corner. We both liked our choices. I found the nephew where shadow becomes wall. Home, I said. I can do it again, he whispered, eager, forgiven. Tomorrow, you're invisible, I said. Invisible even to yourself. He smiled the way boys do when given a sword made of rules. That night, in the cupboard, I told Horace everything in very few words. New sequence validated. Watchers present. Dog calm. Third contact on probation. Possible sweep tonight, engines heard. Received. Proceed. Do not be a hero, London answered. I smiled at the set's little stubborn voice. I have never been a hero. I have been a rumor with good timing. Near midnight, rain arrived, stitching the roofs to the dark. The city let out the long breath she'd been holding all day. I stood at the window and watched the drops turn the cobbles honest. Across the lane, the mirror lay quiet, face to the wall. At the mill yard, the dog curled under the awning and dreamed whatever dogs dream when people finally stop moving them around like chess. Tomorrow would not be rehearsal. Tomorrow, the 3 points would sing. Unless the empty-handed man chose to bring friends. Unless engines grew teeth. Unless Elise's still hands meant a secret she hadn't found the right shape to tell me. I set the flower box on the table and pressed my palm against Cuthbert's strap. Not for luck. For decision. Hold the plan or scatter the web. Tomorrow, I said aloud to no one, we choose. Dawn began like all good endings do, pretending to be ordinary. The baker's nephew passed by with his cap pulled low and didn't scratch his ear. That was our sign. No new eyes, no strange shadows. At the mirror house, the glass was set slightly higher than usual. That meant signal ready. Elise lit the mill's back lamp for just 3 seconds, a stretch of silence before the world forgets itself and begins again. I walked the route slowly, basket light, breath steady. But deep inside, I was preparing to break something. We called it the 3-point delay. A string of tiny pauses timed so perfectly, the supply convoy would hit every note wrong, slowing first, then stopping, then stumbling over its own logic. It wasn't sabotage in the explosive sense. It was sabotage in the musical sense. You let the music play, but you changed the rhythm just enough to ruin the dance. We didn't want destruction. We wanted delay. Delay buys time. Time buys choices. At the first bend, the mirror flashed. At the mill, the dog stirred and barked on cue. At the grain shop, the boy set a basket by the wrong door, our new mark, and walked away without turning his head. Everything worked. Until it didn't. I felt it first in the ground. A hum. But not the heavy kind, this was sharper. Lighter. Then came the whistle. A warning one, short and fast. Not a convoy. A sweep. The kind they used when they suspected couriers. Or wireless operators. Or both. I turned into the alley by instinct. Down, right, left, past the well, behind the carts. I reached the cupboard behind the grain shop just as the echo of boots grew sharp on the stone. Horace was already ready. I kept him assembled, like a gun you never hoped to fire. Abort signal? I tapped. Seconds passed. Too late. Proceed if clear. It wasn't. I could hear it now, 2 trucks. 3 men each. Not stormtroopers, inspectors. They wouldn't kick in doors. They'd knock politely and wait for lies. Elise had already locked the mill doors. The mirror house had gone dark. That left the boy. And me. He'd be easy to explain. I wouldn't. My face had already made someone's list. And my limp had turned into a story being told in too many rooms. I had one option: end the chain. Kill the delay. Let the convoy move. Everyone safe. Mission failed. Or, let the boy take the final signal. Draw the sweep toward the alley. Hope they'd find a child with nothing to hide and no reason to remember me. And in that gap, let the next movement begin. I closed my eyes. Not to think. To remember. There was a girl once, 16, who carried a tin of soap through a checkpoint in Lyon. She smiled too wide. Her coat had too many pockets. They took her anyway. She didn't break. But her brother never saw her again. I didn't want to make another brother wait forever. The boy passed across the alley. He scratched his neck. The final signal. I had seconds. I wrapped Horace in the linen bag, tied it like groceries, and limped. Out the back. Across the square. Into the street where the convoy would hesitate. I had become the pause. "Madam," one officer said. He wasn't unkind. Just tired. I dropped the bag. Let it roll. Eggs inside rattled. "What's this?" he asked. "Gifts," I said. "For who?" "Someone who won't come," I answered. He stared. My papers were correct. My limp was believable. And my eyes. They told a story no man wanted to investigate too closely. He waved me on. The convoy passed 30 minutes late. It was enough. Enough for the resistance group south of the ridge to reroute their meeting. Enough for the girl with the folded map in her dress hem to miss the patrol. Enough for the mill to reset its light. I disappeared for 2 days. Returned with a different name, different accent, different limp. The boy never mentioned me again. But once, as I passed him at the baker's, he dropped a coin and said too loudly, "Oops," which was how he said thank you without drawing attention. I never learned who tipped them off. Elise swore it wasn't her. I believed her. I think it was the air itself. Too full of signals. Too full of rhythm. Even silence makes a sound when repeated. London wrote. Mission successful. Minor delays. Resume standard routing. They never asked how I managed it. That was the job. Do the impossible. Then vanish. Years later, someone asked me what I remember most. Not the danger. Not the papers. Not even the moment I heard my real name on enemy radio. No. I remember the boy's hand scratching his neck. Not because he was scared, but because he trusted me enough to believe it would matter. That mattered. I was never the fastest. Never the strongest. Never the one they expected. But I walked. Through storms. Through fire. Through rooms where no woman was meant to enter. I walked. And every step, limping or not, meant someone else didn't have to.